Hello, this is Faith Schaffner, and this is my video weblog concerning design and spatial intelligence in multimodal compositions, such as architectural and landscape designs, and how these designs can be realized through the medium of the most popular game on the planet, The Sims 2. I will be talking a little about my original design process of landscape design that included what the teacher referred to as a dream house. Design that lasted all semester as we did various mini designs that focused on aspects of landscape and interior design. I completed this project during my senior year in high school, and it took a great deal of effort and planning on my part. The final product was very unconventional. The teacher dealt with my lack of concern with conventions pragmatically. For instance, I was allowed to continue with my architectural design if I could find a similar design in the floor plan books that indicated it was doable. I had to add a load-bearing wall into my design after I discovered the problems with my floor plan. And my originally modest house ballooned into a mansion because I suddenly had the living space of my original center area as well as a segregated honeycomb with which to work. The design was supposed to be one floor, but I couldn't imagine the waste of space that would be, as the design takes up a great deal of land space that way. However, the house was not as important in this class as the way I configured the land around it. My house plan was primarily concerned with absolute self-sufficiency in a time before that was even a consideration for most people at all. So I had to do things like try to figure out the optimal placement of solar panels on the land, not only in terms of efficiency but also aesthetically, which was one concern I had that none of the other students in my class were trying to meet. I also had things like septic tanks, and I had to figure out where they would drain properly, and be in an area that were, they were able to be accessed, but also not be aesthetically displeasing. I also was concerned with incorporating pretty much every type of design of which I had dreamed, and the result is these loosely connected rooms of thematic design in my landscape. I have some experience designing Sims 2 homes from floor plans, but not an extensive amount. This is a highly respected act in the community because it brings what is considered realism to the game. One such project I have completed was very significant for me personally, in that I recreated from images I found on the internet a house that had been lived in by my great grandmother, and that had been a family mansion for years until her father died, leaving them destitute, and they had to sell off this mansion, and it went outside of the family for 100 years before it came back to a distant relative. It's located in Germany, and it was always called Castle Totenbarth in my family, and you as a child imagine a much more classical castle, but it had burned before, so it as in a more 1800s style, but it's beautiful, and I really enjoyed recreating it. So I set out just this week to design this house in Sims 2 that I had created so many years ago using the material resources and affordances of this medium. One thing that you learn very quickly in working with The Sims 2 is that it does not like non-square rooms. Working with octagons, and I have worked with octagons quite a bit in the game because I do like that design style, can be a challenge. And so you have to work with those limitations as well. Of course, it reminds me very much of the article in which Rick's teacher was also very harsh towards 45-degree designs instead of 90-degree designs. So proved very difficult, and I had to start over again several times. You can see I had to make a very large foundation, work out the floor plan itself. I went ahead and made it 2 stories because I had stairs in my original plans. Then there were the things that, like Crest talks about, when he's saying words have certain affordances and images have certain affordances. Well, in landscape design, you draw the doors and whatnot, but you never have to worry about what the doors aesthetically look like. And that was one of the things that tripped me up the most on this design. So you can see here the original design, and that it panned out pretty well and faithfully in The Sims 2. Here's the bare-boned product. And so then I had to pick my walls and floors, and I picked some ripped from Dragon Ages, which is another game. And one of the unique and fun things about The Sims is that it's always been the community's always come up with ways to create custom content, so that any multimodal ensemble you might see is created by thousands of people, depending on how much custom content is there. Who created the textures, who created the mesh, who brought them together, who did the texture color pattern. I know I have 30,000 custom downloads to play the game in the style that I usually play it. So, so much of my game is not mine. But yeah, I've contributed back to the community with lots of custom content myself. The ability to create custom content attracted quite a few enterprising companies during the Sims 2 run, including H&M Fashions and IKEA. So here's the IKEA collection, and here's an example of one of the sofas. Now, one thing that I always want to mention about Sims 2 is though you buy everything through catalog, the text that accompanies the image is always heavily sardonic of a consumeristic culture that it seems to be promoting, which is a very interesting way of drawing attention to the very fact of what you're doing as heavy consumerism, using a catalog to decorate your place like this. So the flavor texts are often very funny and interesting to read. This trailer for the IKEA set shows you a lot about the cultural practices embedded in such a design. It shows different members of what they perceive to be the normal family, imagining several different IKEA pieces, and then the pieces come together in a room that makes them exhilaratingly happy. So you can see some of the cultural practices embedded in the design here. This type of design is a lot like the magazines that produced articles such as Stephanie's Room, so much so that it begins with a child's room and how happy a well-made child's room makes even a virtual person. Speaking of those virtual people, there's a whole design process there where you work with their genes and clothing and physical features. Here's my avatar in Sims 2. So I actually own the shirt and did own the pants and shoes. I'm giving myself traits and that I feel represent me pretty well. It's interesting I come out of Libra, being that I really am. And then it's to the design process itself, where I'll show you a little bit about how to make a living room in Sims 2. It's interesting, once I set all my traits correctly, I had the correct lifetime ambitions, I had the correct hobby enthusiasms, the correct interests. My wants and needs were very realistic. I would like to sell a great novel, of course, and reach maximum enthusiasm in film and literature. So the people themselves can be very realistic to your model. Now that's after applying, like I say, quite a few little modifiable game pieces hacks to make the game more realistic. The end of the article about Stephanie's room talks about the possibility of of being able to interact with all these virtual places and think about what it means for the people that live there. And Sims 2 makes that completely possible. Your design affects the way your Sims will live. This is not the way I usually play the game. I have some screenshots here from some of my other endeavors. I usually use it as a story novel planning device where I'll put these characters together as well as I can portray them and see how their relations go. And it helps me get a feel for how I should write my novels. I engage with these texts as possibilities for life in general, not just my type of life. And I impose that narrative onto these texts, different narratives for different people. I try not to do the noble savage thing too often, but I have groups of Sims that don't have a job, that don't, or maybe they sell wildcrafted things to others, or simply make their living off the land without any concern for income. The game gives you all sorts of possibilities that way, and if the game doesn't give you those possibilities, you can bet some user-made hack will. And it's a virtual dollhouse. Sure, it's a life simulation. Sure, it's an architectural design tool. Sure, but it's more than these things when it comes together. And the strength of the community, even though Sims 3 has occurred, really shows why people love this tool even more than that it's followed it. If you won't even call The Sims 2 a mode, you know that some of the things are that it has limitations and advantages over its predecessor, and some of those, for instance, is the closed lots give you more control. Once you've tweaked the characters correctly, they're very realistic. Going back to The Sims 3, where again, they've added what they consider more personality, but in general they're more just quirks, and they're meant to be funny and stylized. Not really, they don't really indicate what real people are like. So if that's your style of game, that's fine, but if you're using it as a life simulator, it's not so good. Sims 2 was criticized very heavily for having very skinny people, as you can see in my own avatar. But there's more realistic range of body shapes now. However, a lot of people have stuck with The Sims 2 because we've made it the game we want it to be, not the game that EA sent to us. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you learned something from this video about multimodal ensembles.